Muy buenas tardes. En nombre del Banco Interamericano de Desarrollo, les damos la bienvenida a una sesión del evento Outsource to LAC, titulada La evolución del comercio electrónico en tiempos de pandemia, hacia un mercado digital regional. Esta será una conversación entre el presidente del BID, Luis Alberto Moreno, y Marcos Galperín, CEO y fundador de Mercado Libre. El evento será en español con interpretación al inglés y al portugués. Para escuchar la interpretación, haga clic en el icono del mundo en sus controles y seleccione el idioma que desea escuchar. Favor enviar sus preguntas a isabela@iadb.org. Adelante, presidente Moreno.
Bueno, muy buenas tardes y quisiera ante todo agradecerle a Marcos Galperín que nos acompañe en el día de hoy. Sin duda su empresa Mercado Libre es una de los grandes éxitos de América Latina y es un éxito hecho en Latinoamérica por un grupo latinoamericano que claramente pues ha visto los beneficios, como le decía yo aquí antes de arrancar a Marcos, los beneficios los reconoce el mercado. Prácticamente se ha doblado el valor de la acción de Mercado Libre en estos tiempos. Pero no solamente eso. Pensemos por un momento que América Latina venía realmente rezagada frente a otros países en cuanto a comercio electrónico. Y aún así, el año anterior, en el año 2019, vimos un crecimiento del 21%, liderado por un país como México que tenía casi que un 36%. Por supuesto que son incrementos que porcentualmente lucen grandes, pero aún veníamos de un punto muy bajo. Contrario a lo que ha pasado, por ejemplo, con la logística, un aspecto fundamental para el funcionamiento óptimo de las operaciones de comercio electrónico es cómo han venido avanzando en los países de la región. Nosotros en un reciente estudio que hicimos de pequeñas y medianas empresas, encontramos que 7 de cada 10 empresas consideran la logística como un factor importante para poder competir. Y por eso creo que también, y pues seguramente con Marco lo vamos a poder comprobar, previo a la pandemia, tan solamente el 2% del comercio minorista en la región se hacía por vía electrónica, cuando se le compara con otras regiones del mundo desarrollado, en que ese número es casi que 5 veces más alto. Y también no hay duda de que el otro gran aspecto, en el cual ha sido difícil que tengamos una mayor comercio dentro de nuestra región, yo soy un convencido de que ese mayor comercio lo vamos a lograr con el comercio transfronterizo.
And I know that with these new changes, this trade will grow. In the retail sector, we have only 2.6% of GDP compared to about 8% in the Asia-Pacific region. So that intra-regional trade, that's just about 18% compared to Asia, where it's over 60%, or Europe, where it's over 50%. I think the accelerator for us will be e-trade and e-commerce. And the pandemic has helped e-commerce, undoubtedly. We've seen other countries in the world where these processes have jumped forward maybe 5 or 6 years. And then the cases of countries such as Chile and Brazil, where online sales grew by over 120%, 180% in the case of Brazil. So here we have a key tool for small and medium-sized businesses to help them sell in their countries and outside of their countries as well. So this is a deep, profound change, and we should look at a study done exactly by Mercado Libre, where 36% of consumers say they only leave their houses for essential tasks. So their purchases will depend on e-commerce more and more. And a study found also that about 25% of consumers do not feel comfortable physically going to a shopping mall or store for their purchases. So welcome, Marcos. We'd like you to tell us a little bit about the adjustments that you've made to this new reality at Mercado Libre, but also if you could tell us a little bit about this e-commerce process in our region and what opportunities you see looking into the future for small and medium-sized business owners. Good afternoon, Luis Alberto. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be with you here today. Hopefully, we can see each other in person soon when the world goes back to normal. Your shirt looks a bit familiar to me, I have to say, and I hope we can meet again as we used to. Welcome everyone to this dialogue. And about your question, e-commerce, as you were saying, in Latin America had been growing, but from a very small starting point, a very low starting point. It was between 2 and 5% of all sales, and the regional average was perhaps closer to 5% when US was at 15, Great Britain at 20, China 30%. So it was becoming more interesting, but still relatively small. And what COVID has done has been to accelerate the growth and the penetration of e-commerce in the region. And this is positive because digital sales have increased. On the negative aspect, physical sales have dropped. So the penetration of e-commerce has gone up then compared to total sales, perhaps from 5 to 10%. In the US, it went up from 15 to 25%. Possibly in China, it had already reached 50%. So it's been a very fast acceleration. We still have a long road ahead of us. Digital payments, for example, and others are some frictions, some barriers that still exist. And in Mercado Libre, we focus on commerce within a country, but we're experimenting, and in some countries it's really growing in terms of cross-border trading from Asia to Latin America in particular. The countries that made that sort of trade easiest are those that have importing systems and tariff systems that are simple. Chile, Colombia, Peru, and Mexico, for example. Brazil and Argentina have more complex systems in this regard. Tell me a little bit about cross-border commerce and the ability to use a network such as Mercado Libre. There's a clause, the de minimis clause in international trade, and it was created to allow products to come into countries. And in the agreement between the US, Canada, and Mexico, that went up to, was increased to $1,000. This means that any Mexican basically can do their shopping in the US or Canada, because typically what people import is of a value less than $1,000. How do you see this in our region? I've always thought that part of what we need is a single digital market that can strengthen the economy in general, the economies in general, and so small businesses can prosper. Well, we compete with Amazon, and they've taken advantage of that kind of opportunity because they have a large market in the US. They use that inventory to grow in Mexico as well. Our specialty is more trade within a country. So we were lagging behind there. We are growing now in Mexico, but what we do is focuses more on trade from Asia to Mexico, not so much US into Mexico. And of course, the simpler the policies are, the better, but then there are also delivery times that can be longer, but in any case, it is a good opportunity. Tell us a little bit more about something that a lot of people don't look at. It's the number of jobs that a platform like yours can generate, especially downstream in terms of distribution, packaging, cardboard boxes, and then also upstream in distribution, the people you need for that. And you've hired some employees directly, and then other tasks are outsourced. We have 14,000 direct jobs that we've created. We are adding thousands every year. And there are 6,000 other jobs that are our warehouses operated by third parties, but they're for us. So those 6,000 could be our own employees. And then we have 10,000 people who distribute packages. They're not our employees. They're employees of the carriers, but they deliver our packages. So that's already 30,000 people. And then we have 600,000 people who sell their products through our platform, and that's how they make a living. And those people get most of their income from their sales on this platform, and that's where we're really generating employment. And there are many people who perhaps have lost their job, or they just graduated from university, can't find a job, and they start out by selling here, or craftspeople in the countryside perhaps had no way to get their goods to market. So this is a great way to generate jobs and opportunities for people who perhaps would not have had access to opportunities otherwise. And we provide the platform, we deal with their deliveries and payment solutions, and also we loan them capital. We have a very successful operation together with the IDB. We provide loans. We do it in Mexico, also in Brazil and Argentina. We work with the IDB in Brazil, but we also do it in Mexico and Argentina, and I'm sure it will happen in Chile, Colombia, Uruguay, and Peru, and in the other countries where we are operating. And it's a huge opportunity for people who typically get excluded out of the formal financial system because, as I said before, perhaps they've never had a job before, or they're in the informal sector of the economy, so they don't have the documentation or formal documents and information to provide to a bank to get a loan. But through digital data that we have on these people, we can conduct a credit analysis and loan them money digitally. And the most interesting thing about this, Luis Alberto, is that at times like this, during a pandemic, during an economic crisis all over Latin America, we see these payments, or these loans rather, being paid back quite well in spite of what is happening. Very often, these people perhaps had a store that they were forced to shut down. They used to sell half of their products through Mercado Libre. Now they sell almost all of them through Mercado Libre. So they're selling through our platform and they are able to pay back their loans. Tell us a little bit, Marcos, with your experience in this market, what do you think governments can do to support this? If I'm not mistaken, what you do is use big data and understand the loan recipient, given their consumption history and other patterns. And it's different from what a traditional, the analysis that a traditional financial institution would do. And what's interesting too is how quickly you can conduct this analysis, approve the loan, and disperse the loan. Yes, we are proud of this because we make life easier for literally millions of people. We started by granting loans to the sellers who were selling a lot on our platform. Then we offered credit to all those who sold on our platform, whether they sold a lot or not. And then we started offering these loans to all those SMEs that perhaps were not selling through Mercado Libre, but they were being paid through Mercado Pago, which had a POS, so they can take payments through their phone, or they had their own website. So we offered loans to all people using this, and then we started offering loans even to those who purchased through Mercado Libre, even those who were not familiar with open ocean. Anybody who comes in can apply for a loan. And as you said, we can do this because we do have a lot of information about our users, and statistically we can see a very high percentage of our loan recipients would not qualify for a bank loan. Formally, they would be considered outside of the banking system because of the type of credit rating they have. But we feel comfortable offering them loans, and we see that those loans do get paid back, even in these circumstances. It's a model that takes into account thousands of variables and makes a decision. And this also happens completely digitally without the need to fill out any forms or sign them. It just shows up. They see the application. They see you have a line of credit up to X. The vendor themselves chooses how much they want, within what period of time they want to pay it back. Then the rate had been predetermined based on their credit profile, and then immediately those funds are credited to their electronic wallet. It's working well. We have hundreds of thousands of loans that have been granted and millions to buyers as well. There's something you called Mercado Envíos delivery markets, and more than half of the products that people buy online go out in the next 48 hours. They are shipped in the next 48 hours, which is amazing. So given the huge volume of goods that you are beginning to handle, are you going to continue to handle all this yourself? Are you going to outsource this? Well, this is already happening. We don't have our own fleets of delivery vehicles. We hire in different cities where we're present those last mile delivery companies. But we do control a lot of the pieces of that logistics puzzle. We have warehousing centers. 3 years ago, we had none of this. And today, just to give you an idea, over 50 million packages per month are being delivered through Mercado Libre, and this happens through our logistics network. We've had to build warehousing centers in Brazil, Mexico, Argentina, Chile, Colombia. In all those countries, we already have warehouses, and then we have distribution centers, over 70 of them in Mexico and Brazil. And honestly, it's working very well. I'm talking about industry where it's really difficult to project farther into the future than 5 years, but we don't think we will be competing with the postal system. We see them as our partners. What we have developed is a lot of tools and capabilities that are additional to what they offer because we've overwhelmed them with the volume of our deliveries in Mexico, and DHL and all these other couriers have been overwhelmed by this huge growth. So we are increasingly going to smaller companies that can complement what the larger companies do, so we can take care of those demand peaks that come up. Now, listening to you, when we look at numbers from Colombia, Chile, Mexico, in a period of 3 months, it seems that the sums of e-commerce has gone up by over 100%. How has that experience been? How have you responded to such a sudden and huge increase in demand? Well, the truth is we were rather prepared. It's that classic situation where people say you were lucky, but the truth is that you had been preparing for years. Digital payments, we had resolved. Fraud prevention, we had dealt with. And working capital loans is something we already had and we're working on. So we've been doing huge investments in logistics all over Latin America for the last few years as well. So we happen to be very well prepared. Even so, it's been difficult in countries like Chile. We are delivering 6 times as many packages as we were delivering a year ago. So 600, 700% growth. It's unmanageable sometimes, no matter how well prepared you are. But still, in Chile, we continue to deliver over half of our products in less than 48 hours. In Colombia, we've also had growth above 200% in the number of packages, over 300% in Colombia. Chile and Colombia are the ones where we've had the most growth in the number of packages, and the service is something we monitor, and we monitor customer satisfaction, and it continues to be high. And the speed of delivery has dropped somewhat compared to a year ago, but it continues to be a situation where 50% of the packages are delivered within 48 hours in both countries. So with all that distribution and all that you had to do, did you see a lot of COVID cases with your workers, or how did you manage the whole health aspect of it so you didn't have to worry about outbreaks of COVID in the people you hire? We have had COVID cases. Luckily, the huge majority of them have not been lethal in terms of their outcome. And yes, it's necessary to be very careful, and we have a number of initiatives to minimize risk. We use masks, of course, disinfectants, all that. People have to stay far from each other when they work, but they also work in compartmentalized teams, so that when there is one case that's identified of COVID, somebody with COVID symptoms, the whole team goes into quarantine and does not go back to work until that quarantine time has gone by. Everybody's temperature is taken when they arrive, when they leave. And in this way, we've been able to have very low rates of infection, and we have been able to continue operating. Tell us a little bit about, well, clearly there's an increase, and not all companies do e-commerce. So what do you see as the main difficulty that companies have in terms of using e-commerce more? Where are the stumbling blocks? Is it digitalization? Is it the fact that they're not known in the market? Or is it investments that they would need to make in technology? Where do you see these bottlenecks so that those billions of small and medium-sized companies can make themselves able to grow in an environment like this one? I would say it's more of a cultural thing. Some of them just say, well, we don't do internet, that's just for the very young. Internet is not for our kind of product. My product needs to be seen and touched. And I've heard this ever since I came up 21 years ago at Stanford with the business plan, and all my Latin American classmates insisted that this would never work in Latin America. And some of this mindset continues. It's difficult to change people's behavior sometimes. And what causes situations like this, or what situations like this, like what we have now, can bring about is a change in that attitude. Now we have a lot of older people, a lot of seniors buying. They didn't want to do it before. Now they've discovered it and they're fascinated by it. They feel very independent and they really value this. So I would say that the new users that are joining our platform are the ones who like us the most, because they really value the autonomy and the independence that they have when they can buy something without leaving their home and receive it there. And from the perspective of the vendors, well, it's just, it needs to click in their minds that yes, they can sell their products online. And you don't even have to have your own website. I actually don't advise people to get a website anymore, because most of the digital traffic today doesn't come from the internet, it comes from the apps. And building an app is complex because you need to have an iOS app and an Android app, and then you have to get people to download your application, and that's not easy because users will use between 8 to 10 apps per person, and these tend to be the large platform ones. Some social networks, perhaps news, some e-commerce, and one or two brands perhaps that the person really likes. But to be able to sell to someone, you need to realize that people get on a platform. It doesn't have to be hours. You can sell on social media now, or ideally you do it through all these various platforms. You have an omni-channel strategy. So it's just, it needs to click in your mind to say everything that needed to be solved has been solved. Digital payments, that's solved. Deliveries and logistics, that's been taken care of. Now you just need to try it. So in terms of shopping centers and large stores, we're far behind what a country like the US or other developed countries have. But what COVID has done is to prevent all those large businesses from reopening physically. And when they do it very gradually. Would there be an opportunity here for you to create that American concept of the personal shopper there, where you can say to someone, hey, go to the store, buy this for me and bring it to me, deliver it to me? I know that's different from what you do, but I think there might be a good opportunity there as well. Undoubtedly, I think there are so many opportunities, and we tend to think that where we are now is the end of the story, but history continues to change and evolve, and we are at the beginning of the story of e-commerce. After this pandemic and this huge growth that we've talked about, we're still at 10% at most penetration in the region. So this is just the beginning of e-commerce and digital e-commerce, and there will be space for many more uh, businesses and options, and this will offer opportunities to many entrepreneurs. In terms of technology, what are you looking at? I was watching the news yesterday and saw that there's a district near Washington, and there's a library there that delivers books to people because, of course, the library itself is closed. With new technologies such as drones, how do you see this evolving in our region? Well, we already are looking at the drones. We just have to deal with some regulatory matters. The logistics is already taken care of. In Brazil and Mexico, we have 70 distribution centers in small cities, and from there, hundreds of cars, bicycles, motorcycles, and even they could be drones come out and deliver to different places. The drone is not particularly efficient because it can't carry much, but it's ideal for a situation where there's a village somewhere up a mountain and it would take you 4 hours to drive up there, but a drone could get there so fast. It's ideal for a geography such as the geography of Colombia or Peru or Chile, where you have small towns that are not so far away when you look at the number of kilometers, but they are high up a mountain, or there are obstacles in getting there. There are no good highways. And then Brazil and Argentina, or rather Chile and Argentina, Brazil as well, there are long, long distances, so perhaps it's not as interesting there. What's interesting is what's happening with the last mile delivery with companies like Rappi, Pedido Ya in Latin America. They're really growing in terms of that last mile delivery in big cities. You're living in Uruguay, and together with MIT, we're developing a data science program with the support of the IDB. And you're in a country that's been perhaps the most successful one in the entire region in combating COVID. So how do you attract companies from abroad, and can Uruguay become a hub for digital businesses? I would say yes, undoubtedly. It has, as a country, a very stable legal framework. I lived here for 14 years and I went back to Argentina for 4 years. Then I came back at the end of last year. And so over 15 years ago already, they've had a law promoting software development They don't have to pay taxes on their profits, regardless on where in the country they're based. They don't have to be in a duty-free zone. If you export software services, then you don't pay taxes. And it's not just the fact that they don't pay duties, it's because this has been a very stable framework for years through different administrations, different parties, different ideologies, and this provides a certainty that allows companies to invest, to hire, to plan. And I think that's even more important to have that stability in the rules of the game, even more so than whether the tax or what the tax rate is for profits.
Uruguay is a relatively small country, 3.5 million people in terms of its population, but it has a large number of important software companies who are based here. Tell us a bit about, you've talked about regulatory issues during this conversation several times, and I'm sure that in Latin America, over the years, I'm sure you've had a lot of regulatory headaches to create an environment for a company like yours to grow. We can talk about data and look at what Europe did for data protection as compared to what the US has done. So what do you think about this evolution? What do you think that Latin America needs to do so that there are more companies like yours that have the ability to fundamentally change commerce as we know it? But there also must be ways, there must be, as you said, there are huge job opportunities, and how do you train all of these people who then must migrate to providing these types of services? Right, I think that training is fundamental, and that is where governments and public agencies can be extremely helpful. They can try to digitize and provide equal access to digital education to the population insofar as much as possible. I think the opportunities there are tremendous. I think COVID has taught us that it is completely feasible to provide online education. You don't need to have everyone in a classroom. And I think that for governments who dare to make that leap and change, will spend a lower percentage of their budget and they will be able to educate many more people and perhaps use a part of their budget for something else. But the way people are being taught right now, in my opinion, this is the way people were taught 100 years ago. It's very inefficient. It takes up a lot of resources. The education it provides is relatively low quality. And I think that digital tools can be used and a better job can be done. You can educate people better at a lower cost, and you can use the leftover resources for other things. For example, for digital infrastructure, fiber optics, provide fiber optics to everyone, a cell phone to people who don't have them, provide phone plans or payments to parts of the population who are having a hard time paying for broadband services. So I think that governments can do a lot in the area of training and infrastructure. Now, regulatory issues, I think that this is a topic we could literally talk about for 10 hours. But just to summarize this, I think that Latin America needs to be very careful because there are regulatory issues that make a lot of sense, but other regulatory issues, what's happened in Europe, mainly because Europe has not been successful in producing any internet companies to scale. So these are protections in place for large European companies that have not gone digital, especially in finances. I think that we need to be very careful because I see a lot of financial institutions that have not been able to or have not wanted to go digital. They think about data and they view this as a way to protect their traditional banking business, for example, to require that all banking data be in a database in a single country in Latin America. That doesn't make much sense. The important thing is to require that that information be stored securely. And if you want to have copies anywhere in Latin America, you can have copies. So there's a part of it that makes sense and a part of it where the traditional players of the game use them to protect their business, which is a very long and complicated discussion. Right, but just going along these lines, government's frameworks, we are going to publish a study soon about challenges in infrastructure in the region. And surprising information that we found is that 50% of Latin Americans don't have access to digital tools. It may be that it's a broadband problem. It could be that the problem is that people don't have enough money to buy a computer. They probably do have smartphones. So how does this look to you when it comes to digitalization, the types of investments that you think are lacking, that need to be sped up, that would definitely help e-commerce much more, but especially large-scale systems such as health? You're in Uruguay, and we worked on a program there to have portable patient sheets. You can send that to Buenos Aires. People know the hospital. So telemedicine, education, as you said, we might need hybrid systems where classes will be smaller. There's a recent study published by Korea that shows that young people between the ages of 10 and 20 can spread the virus as much as adults can. So digitalization, I think this is one of the most urgent needs our region will have. How do you think this ties into recovery? Right. Again, I think this is a very long and complex discussion, which would include many nuances. But I think that if governments could provide people who are more vulnerable a smart cell phone with a broadband plan that has been prepaid, I think that would be sensational. I hear a lot of people say, well, more vulnerable people or low-income people don't know anything about digital issues, but then you see them, they have cell phones and they're finding date online, they're using Google, they're making plans to meet up with their friends. They're very sophisticated when it comes to using digital tools. They're more sophisticated than governments may think. Governments love to think that people depend on politicians and that politicians need to do things, but people are capable and independent. They can do it. The things they don't have the resources to buy a cell phone or to pay for a broadband plan. Now, health and education, I think the issue there is regulation. As we said in the beginning, we were talking about cross-border trade. Our competitors, Mexico's, when they started, over 80% of their sales were from the US to Mexico. So if you're a doctor in Uruguay or in Colombia, you can't practice in another Latin American country. If you're a university professor, you may be a Nobel Peace Prize recipient, but you can't practice in any other Latin American countries. There are no more industries that are more closed than education and health. You need to have a degree from an institution in that country. If your credentials have not been validated in that country, you can't practice there. Now compare that to trade, where we're talking about over 80% of the volume of what was sold in Mexico from our competitor came from the US. So these industries are tremendously protected and regulated. And I think it's up to governments to find a smart way to modernize these industries. And I think that with a lower budget, one can obtain better outcomes than what we're obtaining right now all over Latin America. And the money we save, we should invest in infrastructure, roads, airports, sewers, water, feeding people, a minimum income for the most vulnerable, and so on. I think that we invest a lot in education and in health, but these are very regulated, very protected areas where corporations dominate. These are dominated by institutions that control these industries, and at the end of the day, they're not providing any kind of service for people who seek education and public health. You were very right, and to me, that's going to be a central issue right now, a key issue. How can we change this? Because it's an essential part of what a new social contract needs to be. As you said, when you were talking about a minimum basic income, universal income for certain parts of the population, we're getting a lot of questions. What has surprised you when it comes to the kinds of products? What is there a new demand for that you had not seen before due to the pandemic? Well, due to the pandemic, sure, maybe the amount of fitness equipment, sporting goods that has been sold, it's hard to transport. We're talking about bikes, treadmills, and these are hard to transport. I thought that was surprising, and also masks and hand sanitizer, that was quite impressive. But that was something that we did see coming. I think what most impressed me due to the pandemic was how the growth of countries like Chile and Colombia was accelerated. It was quite explosive. We maybe underestimated them, but in 3 months, we'd never seen this in our history. It did not happen to any of our countries. They hadn't seen as much growth as we've seen in Colombia and Chile over the last 3 months. We have a question from Paraguay, which is, what are the challenges and Mercado Libre's views as far as expanding business in Paraguay? Ooh, that's an interesting one. This is a challenge for us. To be in a country, we have to have logistics and payments resolved. All financial systems in Latin America are different, they're unique. And so in order for us to resolve payments and logistics in Panama and Paraguay, we need a lot of resources to do that, and we haven't done that. We have payments, for example, in Peru, and that's a much larger market when it comes to the number of inhabitants. So I think it's going to be a while before we get to Paraguay. We have another question. What is necessary for Mercado Libre to operate from Europe or the US to our countries? As you know, when it comes to remittances, the most remittances come from Latin Americans to the region, mostly to Mexico, Central America, and the Caribbean. So what's necessary so that all of these services can operate from there, especially so that our migrants have transactions that create more value in our economies? Well, maybe some of you know this, but PayPal is a shareholder of Mercado Libre, and we signed an agreement to exchange best practices. And we're announcing that the first step of that partnership will be, right now it's the opposite. No, right. With a PayPal account, you will be able to buy anywhere that accepts Mercado Pago. So if you're Mexican and you live in the US and you have money in PayPal and you want to buy something for your family who lives in Mexico or in Colombia or Brazil or Argentina, anywhere we have Mercado Pago, you can buy things on Mercado Libre with Mercado Pago, or anywhere in Latin America that accepts Mercado Pago, and you can send that product to your family who lives in Latin America. So that's starting now. It'll be up and running in the next week. The second step here will be for you to be able to use your money in Mercado Pago on any website that accepts PayPal. So that we're still not talking about sending remittances, but it is a very important step. One question for you. You've seen how innovation has changed. You've seen this more than anyone because you've been at this for over 20 years. You've been the Lone Ranger here for quite a long time. But currently, it's impressive. You see it in Uruguay and in Brazil, especially in Mexico, Colombia. There's been an explosion when it comes to innovation around startups. We have supported a couple of businesses that now have become unicorns due to an investment fund supported by the IDB. Now, from your perspective, I can imagine that you're always looking at options for buying businesses and consolidating Mercado Libre's business. But what do you think about current innovation? You, better than anyone, know that if you have venture capital funds for that, what comes to our region is minimal. The entrance of SoftBank and such has gone up, but not to the point where it should have grown. And this means that large ideas developed by young people end up at some point collapsing due to lack of financing. Well, I love to say that the biggest venture capital fund in Latin America belongs to two of my partners in Ancasan, who launched CASEC. I think they've created their fifth fund. It's been extremely successful. It's not enough, as you said, and rightly so, but there's a lot more capital for startups than there was 21 years ago. And a lot of angel capital from Latin American families who are willing to invest in these businesses. Of course, it's nothing compared to what we see in the US, China, or Europe, but it's more than we had. Now, I'll highlight Brazil. Brazil is impressive. What's going on there in the digital realm is impressive. The number of businesses that are there, the competition, the innovation we see there, it's really impressive. Brazil, in that regard, is in a league of its own in Latin America because of its scale, its idiosyncrasies, and just the number of businesses, the financing volume, the companies that have uh, been listed on the local stock market, the financial press, which is very sophisticated. I've seen articles in the Brazilian media, and they really could have been written in the US, very profound, very professional, and it's not the same in other countries of Latin America. We have so many questions, and I think we won't have time to ask Marcos all of these questions. But there's a push and pull between e-commerce and the labor market. Will this push wages downward, or will people migrate to e-commerce? People who migrate to it, will they actually have a better shot if they have job opportunities there? I think the internet is a great democratizer when it comes to opportunities. First, it will help provide excellent education to many more people, because right now you could be anywhere in Latin America and you could be studying like my son is doing. You could be taking an MIT course without having to go to MIT. So first of all, it's the big equalizer when it comes to excellent education for all. And then what we see from countries like the US, which is much more advanced than Latin America, is that the internet has created a lot of jobs and a lot of very well paid jobs. So it's not going to be it's not going to be Latin America's salvation, but it will be a very good complement. I think that Latin America has a lot of resources that it still needs to make the most of, but it does need to embrace this digital change, because the knowledge economy increasingly is the big job creator and the big value creator worldwide. And large industrial factories that used to create the most jobs create fewer jobs because they're done, they've been automated, and it's also easier to send a factory somewhere else. Whereas if you have a knowledge base in a country, then that remains there. So I think that's what countries need to try to foster as much as they can. We have a question from Bolivia. The credits you offer, are these open to anyone who would like to provide goods and services? Depends on the country. It's not open to every country. It depends on activity on the site. You are allowed different amounts, but any vendors who's been selling for us for over 6 months will most likely have access to a line of credit. We have another question from Colombia. You probably know that in Colombia, there was a tax holiday where the value added tax was not paid. That led to growth of 180%. And so what did you see? What do companies need to do to serve their companies better? We saw people literally knocking down doors of stores to get in. So what do companies who offer these products, what should they do to better prepare to sell online? Use a platform like ours. We saw incredible growth, and we are seeing it every time one of these days, these tax days, tax holidays comes around. I think there was one last week too. And really the growth we see is huge. As I said at the beginning, we've built a logistical infrastructure that allows us, by hiring smaller companies, not just large companies, rather we also hire smaller ones. And so we're able to better deal with these peaks in growth. And we've done this very well in Colombia. Well, Marcos, finally, you are clearly a Latin American icon. It's fascinating to see your success, your consistency over the years. What we need in Latin America are more people like Marcos Galperín who are able to do what you've done. So when you look to the future, when you look at innovation over the region, how do you see the time of COVID as contributing in Latin America so that we don't have to depend on any one thing? Rather, we can depend on someone like Marcos Galperín. Thank you, Luis Alberto, for your kind words. I'm an optimist. I think that there are a lot of extraordinary companies in Latin America, digital companies. I think there are many more that will be created over the next 20 years. I have hopes that one of them will be in the area of education. What we're doing for business and digital payments, I think someone should do that in the world of education. I think that that would add huge value to the region. It's very complex because the more regulated the industry is, the more complicated it is. And we see this in finances, which are more regulated than trade, the central banks, which oftentimes protect banks. It's been more difficult. But even so, we see a lot of progress with Mercado Pago, and I think education will be even more complicated than finances, but I think this is necessary. So I'm an optimist. I see a lot of stories in Argentina, Globrand, which has a company, I think, worth over $7 billion. It's very successful. It's a software developer. In Brazil, we have a lot of businesses in safe payments, digital payments, Equipet, Stone, for example, among others. 3 out of these 4 are already public with very high assessments. So there are a lot of success stories out there. I think there will be even more. And I think we're on the right track. That's great, Marcos. Thank you very much for your time. I commend you, and I mean this from the heart. I've been following you for many years, and you are a true inspiration for so many Latin Americans. And what this shows is nothing comes for free in life. You need to be consistent. The fact that you were prepared, I've seen you year after year fighting from the trenches, very difficult issues in our countries with regulators who do not understand this. But I see that due to COVID, right now, this is a region that really needs to rethink the way it links to markets, finds alternatives, and this is exactly what you're providing. So I hope, as I said before, that there will be more Marcos Galperins from here on out, not just in fintechs, but also in government areas, health, education. There's a lot of room for innovation there. So thank you very much, and I commend you for everything you've done. Thank you, Luis Alberto. Thank you, everyone, very much for this dialogue and for your questions. Bye.